I have always wanted to do that. Walk on stage with Tupac playing in the background. Thank y'all for making that happen. Whew. Welcome, everybody. Thank y'all for being here. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Denton, Texas. Isn't Denton beautiful? It's a little magical spot in North Texas that I never knew about, that I never knew that I wanted to live without. So I'll be back, Tony, for sure. So anyway, on behalf of myself, TASA staff, and the board, I think it's safe to say that we are super excited to finally have y'all here in one spot, to host y'all here. We were very thankful to Tony Johnson Simpson and her staff at the Denton County Friends of the Family for kind of being on that planning journey with us the whole way and helping us through navigating Denton and getting things together. So thank y'all so much for that. But man, y'all, we have so much to catch up on. It's been one hellified year. Am I the only one that feels that way, or does anybody else feel that way? For sexual assault advocates, sexual advocacy, for survivors, it's been one hellified year. So we've been tested. We have been, or maybe I have been tested. I know some of you that are dealing with budgets and grants and reimbursements. I know y'all have been tested, and together we collectively, you know, won that fight for now. But man, it has been hard. And I also want to say, and I want to make it crystal clear, y'all, that TASA stands behind and will stand with and support the trans community in our state of Texas. TASA also stands with and supports and wants to be an ally to the LGBTQ community in our great state of Texas. And also TASA, we recognize racial inequity and how we are kidding ourselves if we're thinking we're going to address sexual assault and ignore racial inequity. We've got to address all those things together, and gender inequity. So I think a lot of the times it's very convenient for us to say, oh, that's not my problem. You know, oh, poor things, but that's not no longer do we have that luxury. It's important that we recognize the intersections. And until we do, we are kidding ourselves if we think that we're actually scratching the surface on addressing sexual violence in Texas. And seriously, y'all, that's reality. It's not rhetoric, because sometimes these words will come back to weaponize. And I'm just kind of done with that. I've decided I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to talk about reality, and that's reality, not rhetoric at all. And also, y'all, you know, we want to collaborate with faith-based communities. I think we have more in common than people want to acknowledge. So I just wanted to say that, because I know there's some faith-based communities that came to our conference. We welcome you. And I feel like we need to work together, because again, we have more in common than we realize, and that other people want to allow us to realize. So also I want to recognize some folks that are here. I'm not sure if they're in the room yet, because it is kind of early, because our work, it intersects. Like, sexual assault does not happen in a vacuum at all. Like I said, we talked about all these intersecting movements. But the first group I want to recognize, and maybe some of y'all are here, is human trafficking. Now, first and foremost, TASA has been in the human trafficking space for over 2 decades. We also recognize that we're the Sexual Assault Coalition. At the same time, we recognize that sexual assault sometimes is at the heart of human trafficking. There's also other forms of trafficking. So I wanted to see if Sophia Struthers is here, if her and the rest of the Human Trafficking Leader, Survivor Leader Council, if any of y'all are here, please stand up and wave. I want everybody to recognize them, see them. Welcome, y'all. Thank y'all for being here. And please, again, I want us to learn from each other. Those women, they're survivors, they're professionals, they're experts in their own right, and we thank them and want to acknowledge their presence here, and also how their work intersects with our work. I'd also like to have the members of TASA's Survivor Advisory Board stand up if you're here. Wave so people can see y'all. So this is where I think in our work, we're all struggling. Like I will even say, we have a survivor advisory board at TASA. Are we using it and utilizing it in its fullest? Probably not, but that's what we count on survivors to remind us about. But basically the concept, Amanda Lewis, I don't know if Amanda's here, but that was Amanda Lewis's idea. And I was just like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's make it work. And she did, and she built this infrastructure for that. And so basically the concept is that we have survivors up front and center, that they help in guiding and informing all the decisions that we make just as advocates, as leaders. So wanted to acknowledge them. The other kind of area focus is family violence. So I don't know if Gloria Terry is in the room this morning. She may not be. Oh, there you are. Hey, Gloria. So everybody say hi to Gloria. So TASA and TCFB, we are just like sisters. I joke around and say that TASA, we're the younger rowdy sister. And everyone says, y'all need to be more like your older sister not older, your sister TCFE. And TCFE is the more refined, and they've been doing it a little bit longer. They're just really great at what they do. And then we both agree that CAC Texas is that rich aunt that we all go to borrow money. But family violence is something that, again, intersection with sexual assault. We know there's distinctions with human trafficking. There's distinctions with domestic violence, distinctions with child sexual assault versus adult sexual assault. But we all need to come together to talk about what that is, recognize those similarities, and also honor those distinctions. It's not an easy thing to do, which is why I so appreciate and respect dual agencies, because somehow you manage to do that. You have two big issues of domestic violence and sexual assault, and manage to uphold both of those in a way that they need and need to be honored. So thank y'all for all the dual agencies in here as well. So also want to say that, so thank you all for like, again, the human trafficking groups and faith-based. I know that you all are here, the dual, sexual assault, domestic violence programs, and the rape crisis centers. Thank y'all for being here. We are all on the same team. All on the same team. There is a real enemy out there, and it's not any of us in this room. We might not agree on it. We might not be as far ahead as others want us to be, or we may be too far ahead that someone is comfortable with. At the end of the day, we're on the same team. And I think that we need to remember that, and that we need to continue to help each other move forward. Otherwise, if we don't, the real enemy is just going to continue. I know that sounds really battlefield talk, but the real problem, the real issue, the challenges, whatever word you're comfortable with, that's going to continue to go, because that's kind of what's counted on. So I say, let's unify, let's connect, let's get to know each other, let's learn about each other's issues, and and let's have a good conference. So thank y'all so much, and I'm going to invite now my colleague, Amelia Romo, who's going to do a land acknowledgement. We don't want to begin anything without giving respect and honor and paying tribute to the land before us. So I will hand it over to Amelia.
Good morning, everyone. The Ilmanam. My name is Amelia Romo. I'm the Learning and Evaluation Specialist at TASA, and I'm an enrolled member of the Tapilam Coahuiltecan Nation, one of the tribal nations and original peoples of my home territories, which we call Yanaguana in our language, currently also known as San Antonio, Texas. This acknowledgement of land that I'm going to read this morning is borrowed with permission to fit the context of where we currently stand from the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions, which aims to preserve and protect the culture and traditions of the Tapilam Coahuiltecan Nation and other indigenous people of the Spanish colonial missions in South Texas and North Mexico. We acknowledge this place known to us as Denton, Texas, as the traditional homeland of many Native American peoples who are documented in historical records as tribes, bands, and clans that include the Wichita, Caddo, Comanche, Cherokee, and Kiowa. These communities, as well as many other Aboriginal peoples, continue to carry their traditional life ways. We acknowledge these various Indigenous communities as the traditional people and caretakers of this land currently called Denton, Texas. We acknowledge that the flags which have flown over this city and state during the last 300 years have never fully honored Indigenous people who continue to be excluded from processes that directly affect their cultural traditions, ancestors, and future generations. We acknowledge the willingness of our communities to seek healing for all the harms of colonization, which are still present in Denton and the greater state of Texas, reflected in the unequal distribution of resources, housing, education, and access to healthcare. We acknowledge the opportunity to promote equity by centering the needs of Native peoples in decisions regarding public policy, service delivery, and distribution of resources in a manner that accounts for historical realities. We acknowledge the resiliency, tenacity, and ability of Native Americans to survive, heal, and thrive despite the systemic oppression they have faced, and we commit to celebrating their successes. Nalitsam, thank you.
I should have worked out about a week before because I'm out of breath by the time I get up here going up and down these stairs. So apologize for that. So, all right. I know that we probably need 2 mics for our wonderful AV people who have the music flowing and everything else. So unless they're up here and I just, so I'll just let them know about that. But next, y'all, we're having our coffee chats. So first, I want to apologize wholeheartedly on behalf of Tony and I. We just realized that we both talk really fast. And for the language interpretation, you're supposed to slow it down. So I feel for Denise, who's going to have to like jump up and down and tell us to slow it down. So if we're talking a little slower, that's why. So I'm very excited. When we decided to come to Denton, the first thing I told the staff, we need to contact Tony and her group over at Denton County Friends of the Family. And we contacted them, and immediately they were like, what can we do to help? We have these ideas. The event tomorrow is their idea. They have worked hard to have all the wonderful, the food and the music and all that stuff. So we're very excited about that. But before that, though, I knew that Tony was a force. So I thought, this is perfect. We're going to have our first coffee chat, and we're going to invite Tony as our guest. So I'm really excited. So we're going to have a conversation, but please help me welcome Tony from Denton County Friends of the Family to the stage. So I don't know what, do we get mics or? Oh, we can make that happen. Beyonce's another one. That's another. We'll have to do that when we're walking off. Okay. All right. Can y'all hear us still? Okay, awesome. I know I look awkward sitting up here because I'm just not used to sitting on a. There we go. Sorry, y'all. Okay. All right. And I also want to welcome the online folks, our virtual folks. Thank y'all for joining us online. I can't see y'all. I don't know if y'all can see me or not. But anyway, so I have my notes here because it's just too much going on. Like I said, we had a hellified year. I'm gonna slow down. I'm looking at Denise. Okay. Okay, Tony. So y'all have done some amazing work. You, under your leadership, you have done some amazing work at Denton County Friends of the Family. I know that statewide you're a force. I've heard about you even before I knew who you were, just because you have a different way of leading that just gets things done, but it's also compassionate. So tell me a little bit about you and your leadership and, what brought you even to Denton County Friends of the Family.
That's very nice, very generous of you. I have some of my staff in the audience. They're probably like rolling their eyes. Look at them. Donna Bloom back there. Oh, I see marketing development, clinical services. It's first of all, welcome to Denton. We're so glad to have all of you here. It is so exciting. We have not had this beautiful convention center for very long. So this is the first statewide conference that we've had in Denton that is part of our people, as we say. So welcome to Denton. We're glad to have you all here. I ended up at Denton County Friends of the Family because honestly, I started in this work. I went to school here at TWU, Texas Women's University, working in undergrad in social work. And I was, believe it or not, the smart aleck in class. That carried from elementary school all the way through college, and it still lives within me today. And so really I took a violence against women's course, and that course, the professor was giving the stats and the data, and I was kind of rolling my eyes. And she said, "You don't believe me?" I said, "I don't think it's that prevalent." And so she said, "You should go volunteer at Denton County Friends of the Family." And so I did. I went and did a 30-hour social work student volunteer stint at the shelter, which was located near the TWU campus. And I was in awe of not only the survivors that were receiving services there, but mostly of the staff, of the dedication, of the work, of the commitment that I saw, and that they understood this issue on a way that I had just begun to scratch the surface. So for me, it sparked a passion that I went on to work in other domestic violence agencies throughout the Metroplex. And then 18 and a half years ago, a colleague of mine sent me a listing for the job in Denton as the ED, and they said, "That's your job." And I said, "You think so?" I said, "Yeah, I'd been executive director. I'd worked in the city government. I'd done some other things." And they said, "Nope, that's your job in Denton." So they interviewed me about 2 or 3 times, and I asked me for a 3-year commitment. So we can say I'm a woman of my word because I've been here 18 years.
Yes,
So.
yes, I know we did. So Tony, did you grow up in the area? Or
I did. I grew up in Denton, and that was the other thing, is growing up in this community. It's not that I had not seen violence in homes or in relationships. It's not that I did not know that sexual abuse occurred. I didn't know a name. I didn't understand the philosophy. I didn't understand the intervention. I didn't understand those things. It's not that I had not witnessed them or seen them. I thought that they were more kind of one-off as opposed to 1 in 4. Do you see? I thought it was I thought, we all knew of people in the community who she had to leave, or they were fighting, or this girl had been touched by an uncle. I knew of those things, but even as a college student, as a young 21-year-old woman, I did not understand fully the impact and the severity of both of the issues of sexual assault and domestic violence.
It's funny because I grew up in small town Texas. I grew up in rural Texas, and it's the same. And I went to A&M and got a business degree. So I went down this weird path and finally got to TASA. When I first started at TASA, was doing like the business side of stuff. Same thing, fell in love with the staff, the advocacy. Once I met people in the field doing the job across Texas, I thought, oh my God, this is it. Like, I love this. And so I call myself a social worker now. I'm not, for those of you that have I don't have a license, but a social worker at heart, I should say, is the way I see myself now. But yeah, so I completely understand when you say that you fell in love with the movement and all that. So, and earlier I had mentioned about how, we have to stand for and beside and behind and support and be allies to the trans community in Texas and LGBTQ. I feel like there's a lot going on, not only in Texas, but across the country that target, I think about undocumented survivors.
Absolutely.
And how, so the portrayal of them and how some folks may internalize what that means and what it doesn't mean. And I know that you all here do a lot of great work with the different communities. So, okay, first question is, what all are you doing in those communities? And then the second question is, how do you maintain that work and still maintain the partnerships with folks?
I think the thing that we do the best is we listen. That we listen and we look for ways and avenues to be collaborative. That we listen to all aspects of our community. Denton in itself is a very conservative community, honestly. We are blessed to have two major universities here, but there's a lot of conservative thoughts and perspectives in Denton. And so we just are very intentional about partnership, whether that be partnership with marginalized communities, partnership with our law enforcement partners, with our nonprofit community. We're just very intentional, and we start out really by listening, by having our communities, particularly our marginalized communities, tell us what they need. And then we look at how we can go about doing that. And
I'm not sure.
I think they cut yours off too.
In that spot over here. I think it's still here.
Okay,
Oh, there we
so
go.
I think that I'm really honored and privileged to work with really, really smart, ambitious people, and the majority of those being women. And so we listen, there's a great deal of collaborative work that happens with us. And even when we disagree, we can come out of a room with an agreed upon path. And that is sometimes because there have been times when they've had to drag me along, believe me. There have been times when they were like, we need to be doing this. We need to have this voice. We need to have this on our social media. And there have been times I've been hesitant because, you know, I always have to think about the dollar. And I have to think about the community that we come from, and the people I have to go to and sit at the table and ask for money. And so as sometimes we can't be as loud and proud as we want to be, that we need to be very intentional and very selective on our path. But a lot of times it's definitely been my leadership team. They drag me along and they don't allow for excuses. And I'm honored to be able to really to work and serve with them because they hold me accountable. And I would say as leaders, if you don't have people around you that hold you accountable, then you're missing out. You know, there are some of them out there. Wave your hand if you're on the Tony accountability team. Yeah, Catherine will raise her hand really fast. Donna, yes. So I'm always honored to be able, because they do, they keep us on the forefront. They always keep us looking towards the future and how we can do things bigger and better, honestly.
I love that you said that because when I'm talking to other folks about, TASA staff and what we do. And I was like, you know what? TASA staff does not allow me or anyone else to stay stagnant.
Mhm.
They're going to always push. Now there's times that I have to say, okay, yeah, I want to push like that, but
Right.
so, and I struggle with that, Tony. I don't know
Exactly.
if you do. Like, I feel am I a
Absolutely.
sellout? I don't mean to
Mhm.
be a sellout. It's
Right.
just I'm trying to make sure we all get a paycheck.
Right. I always say I can't be bought, but I am on a short-term leash sometimes. You know,
Me, I like that.
sometimes we do in reality have to have a short-term lease. You can't buy me, but yeah, you can lease sometimes. Yes, that's just real. Because we do want to make sure everybody gets a paycheck, and they want us to make sure they get a paycheck. But yeah.
It's so funny. We were in, some of the staff and I went to Portland. There's a crime victims something conference, CVLI, for those of you that may know what it is. And so there was a person, she's an attorney, she's in DC now, and she's like, oh my God, I've been watching you. She said, I don't know how you do it in Texas. She said, if it was me, I would have alienated everybody.
Mhm.
TASA would have been defunded. I was like,
Right.
there's times that I wish I could do that, but it just, we have to make sure and maintain. And I know there's sometimes, even with our legislative stuff, so I'll
Sure.
kind of get into that. Our TASA's legislative things, we have a coalition, a bipartisan coalition. Luckily here in Texas, it has not turned political. I was afraid there for a little bit that it was going to, but it hasn't yet. We have both Democrats and Republicans and everything in between, who do support TASA, who support survivors of sexual assault, who support those who do this work. But in your area, y'all had the bigwig. She's retired now, but Senator
Yes.
Jane Nelson.
Absolutely. She was a champion definitely for victims' rights. And so we are and we were very fortunate. Donna Bloom, who's our Director of Legal Services, she has always maintained that relationship with Senator Nelson and still does. And so that's been very, very helpful for us in looking on things in a statewide level. Sure.
Because we've gotten increases. I don't know, for those of you that get SAPCS state, TASA, we go to the Capitol, Liz and the policy team, we go to the state along with Shannon and we ask for more money. But it was Senator Jane Nelson who
Mhm.
was chair of the finance committee. In other words,
Yes.
she held the purse strings. So it was really nice to
Mhm.
have Tony and the team. We would say, hey, can y'all get a hold of, Nelson? And they would every time. And I tell you what, every year since I've been in there, because of the collaborative partnership with local folks and with both Republicans and Democrats, we've gotten an increase, every biennium, including this year, which we're
Mhm.
very excited about. So yeah, and we also have gotten some hate mail because of our collaboration with Senator
Yes.
Nelson. And do y'all get the same thing?
Not hate mail, but I get it in person. I'm getting verbal, yeah.
I think that's, yeah, I don't know if in person, I'd be okay too, but yeah, we'll post something and just thanking folks for what they do. And then, we hear about how TASA is a big sellout and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. So,
Yes.
but I'm like, at the end of the day, we're here for survivors of sexual assault.
Right.
And at this level of state and doing the policy work, we have to ensure. So those are one of those areas, y'all, that some of us may be like, we agree or we disagree, but that's why we're here today, is to talk through those things. Because for those of us that have to, who have to take that step, I have guilt all the time. I'm like, oh God, I know that this is probably not the popular thing with this side of the house, but it needs to happen for survivors of sexual assault. That's kind of my North Star, due north or whatever, however you say that, is just making sure that the survivors of sexual assault get what they need. What advice do you have, Tony, for the rest of us in coming up or creating innovative programming, reaching those marginalized communities? I know you said that you just like to sit and listen. Do you have any other advice or steps that for those out there that want to start programs for adult sexual assault survivors or with marginalized communities?
I think it's to don't be afraid to think outside the box, and to look at things that are kind of multifaceted. One of the new projects we just had funded through a collaboration with TASA is a mobile sexual assault advocate. And that really came out of, we have been very intentional about our partnerships with law enforcement. And to the point of, we have a retired law enforcement officer that's now on our staff. So he goes out and provides the training. And one of the things we realized with the new developed SART team and changes with our SANE program and our SAT, as we call survivors advocacy team, is that we really needed an advocate that was dedicated to going out to meeting with law enforcement, with survivors, being that voice in the room with survivors. And so that has been, I think, one of the things, and she's bilingual, so it helps us to reach a population that maybe we wouldn't if we just only had an English speaking person. But it is just being very intentional, but hoping that those things, looking at things that have kind of a multifaceted part to it, because that really helps our relationship with law enforcement. And that helps for them to see us in a different light sometimes. Now having someone who is a former police officer who is saying the same thing that we've been saying for 42 years, right? But when he says it to law enforcement, but he can also say, because the thing they always come back to us is, yeah, but you've never been on scene. You never been there. But now he can say that he's been there, and he can take our same values, our same information, talk about the same policy, but it makes such a difference to hear it coming from a peer. And it puts us in the space to be able to have more collaborative conversations. I think we've had the opportunity to participate in some training with our law enforcement, and it gives us a different level of holding them accountable. Because we're not just calling them. It used to be years ago, they do have a bad call. We would call them, or I'd have to call them and say, hey, that was horrible. But that gets really old for them, honestly. And so now we have learned that we need to be collaborative with them. We do DVHRT. We have Lori Nelson, who's on our team, who's the director of our community engagement, and she is focused on them. She's out there, she's talking to them, she's sending them an email so that when they need training, they think of us. We're always offering it to them, but it's even best when they reach out to us. When there's new updates, when the strangulation information came out, we just are able to get that information to them quicker, and they take it and receive it from us in a different vein. But it's been a lot of effort, and those things have a ripple effect, because when they drop the call or do something not as survivor friendly, then now Lori, who has more of a relationship with them, or Chris, who's the retired officer can call them. And then they go back and they look at it and they review themselves. And then we've had several instances where they have then gone back and increased the charges and gone back and rectified that. So it makes a difference for survivors.
You know, I love that because I'll say that I've been across the state and we either have one of three. We have folks who have figured it out like you, right? You're friendly, but you're not like you're friendly and you can still hold each other. Maybe you're still friends. You're friendly and you hold each other accountable, or you hold them accountable in a way that makes sense, in a way that's meaningful.
Sure.
Other categories I've seen is they're just friends. They will work in collusion with law enforcement and you know, things like, well, law enforcement may say, can you get the survivor to do this? Where our role is not that. So
No.
I've seen that. And then I've also seen where there's just straight up, you know, fights.
Yes.
between.
That used to be us.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. We used to be very adversarial with law enforcement, and it was not productive for survivors, honestly.
So how did that change? What happened and how did that come to where you are now?
Just really looking at how do we become, I think, when we were tired. We were tired of the fight that we have 40 something law enforcement agencies in our community, in our county. So we would have really good relationships with one, maybe Denton PD, which is the larger. And then we would find that, God, these other ones, and it was so frustrating. And so we just really about 4 years ago became very intentional. We had a horrible domestic violence homicide that happened here, I think 7 years ago, Donna, was it? And it was really, but it was a horrible incident. But what happened from it is that it really forced our agency, the district attorney's office and the city of Denton Police Department to come together. And we did some amazing work. And we were able to hold that murderer accountable. And he brought him back from Mexico and he was prosecuted. We brought the child back and we continued to serve that child. And so as a result of that, we had to start looking, I think from that, we developed a different relationship with just a couple of police officers, right? And we're like, oh, there are two good ones. And then we start talking to them more. And then Donna was like, no, they're really good. And now if you know Donna Bloom, for her to say they were good, that carried a lot of weight. And so we started doing more collaborative work with them. And then a few years later, Lori Nelson, who had been a veteran at the CAC in Denton County, came on board our team, and we just started to develop that relationship. And she came already with those relationships with law enforcement. And so she had to come over and really translate what we do. And now coming from child abuse world to the adult sexual assault and domestic violence world, then she was in shock because everything for them is mandated and regulated. And for us, those things are not. And so it's choice for survivors. And so, but she was able to come and really cultivate those relationships. And it has been for us a lot of work, a lot of effort, very intentional, very deliberate, but it has made the world a difference for the survivors that we serve.
It seems like at the core is, like you said earlier, with the marginalized communities, you're listening. You're like, okay, let me listen and let's listen and see what's going on here. I'll never forget when I was doing hospital accompaniment work where I live in Williamson County. So I was at TASA, and then I thought, well, if I'm training on this, I'd never, and again, I was a business major, so I had never worked, you know, at a rape crisis center. So I wanted to be able to speak about this because I felt a tremendous amount of responsibility. If I'm going to talk about survivors, as you know, adult survivors of sexual assault, I don't want to just talk about it. I need to know like what's happening. And so I figured that if I'm at the hospital when they get there and I go through that process, that then I'll have some semblance of just knowledge to draw from. Not, you know, again, it's not the do all end all, but as I was doing that, there was a law enforcement officer, one in particular that I just didn't like. He didn't like me either. So we'd get there and I was, of course, taking my role as an advocate very seriously.
Right.
And I would say, no, and so then I thought, okay, I got to be professional. Let me get him out in the hall and tell him these things. Well, he didn't want to go with me in the hall. He wanted to fight in front of the server. I'm like,
right.
Oh my. So it was like that kind of thing. And it just so happened that every time I got the damn call, it was him. I'm like, God.
Your friend.
We we just, and then one day I got there and he was of course, already there. And he was in a room and he had his head, down like this. And so I just had a moment of compassion and I just said, hey, are you okay? Would you like some coffee? And he says, oh, that would be great. I had to work a double. The person didn't show up. So here I am having to work again. And I haven't seen my kids and my wife and whatever. And I just sat there and listened. And, after that, we were friends.
Mhm.
I didn't have any more issues with him. And then he wanted to talk to me. Then he would say, you were trying to tell me.
Mhm.
And then he would listen. But it was just something that simple, I know. So I think it's kind of the same, like listening.
It's listening, and we have to humanize them. And sometimes we forget to do that because we're really fixated on the survivor. But I think we've learned that there is a value in developing those relationships. And, we have police chief on our board. And one of the things he said is that you guys have the benefit of knowing as officers, we're going out to respond to the call. And we don't know what happens after that. And we may have been out to that house 2 times or 10 times, but you get the benefit of knowing the end result and knowing like kind of sometimes the happy ending. You get to see that survivor afterwards and we don't. And so when I started looking at it, they're getting just this really brief kind of glimpse into our survivor's life, but they don't get to have the whole story of him or her. And it makes a difference because you can get really jaded if you're only going to have that little brief intersection with them. So we have started providing some of that. And we do a law enforcement luncheon called Friends of the Badge, and we give them awards. And we are just very intentional over and over again about those relationships.
That's wonderful. And so your SART, how is the SART going here in Denton County? Has that been in existence before SB 476 or did it get more?
No,
what's
it
going on?
became really in existence as a result of the legislature. It was, and that falls under Lori Nelson's jurisdiction as well. And, we are very fortunate to have people in our community that were willing to step up. And Dr. Lavinia Masters participates on our SART, who sits on your board. Everyone knows her. And so we have been very fortunate that for us, the SART was not a leap, but it was more of an acknowledgement and a call to come together to collaborate. So it just reinforced already the kind of the values that we had already been doing in our community. But now we had this legislature say, oh, you have to do it. And that felt good.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. So I can let Liz and the policy team know that. I know it wasn't like the best, and there's like other ways that it could have been better. But I had to tell someone came to me, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe, I love the law and I love that you all have to, it's mandated, but you could have done X, Y, and Z. And so I had to let folks know that is great. And actually we had all those in there, but once we draft up a bill, once our team drafts the bill, then it goes to Ledge Council, who then chops it up.
Sure.
And after that, it's out of our control. But actually, Senator Jane Nelson was,
She was
the one that helped push that through. And I'll never forget, that was the 87th legislative session. For those of you that watch that kind of stuff, like I'm a policy nerd. I'm just really excited when it's that policy time in Texas. But it was like I don't know if y'all remember, the Democrats ran off because of the voting bills and things like that. And I was like almost crying, going, oh my God, they never. And then there was this whole thing that Lieutenant Governor was only letting, each senator have one bill, and Nelson had already done hers. I'm like, oh my God, it's over. And then all of a sudden she came up and laid that out and they all voted on it. I'm like, oh my God. So it's like, that was that last bipartisan thing before the Democrats took off running. So it was just really interesting. But I thought that was, so thank you for sharing with us that is.
And that always helps in our community, honestly, that Senator Nelson is a part of it. That helps us. We say to Commissioner's Court, Senator Nelson, let this bill, and then that's almost an, immediate thing where it gets attention and they're very receptive.
So who is your new representative now? I know that Nelson's gone.
I don't know. I'm
if
sure
it
Donna
is.
knows.
Okay, we know if we need them.
I mean,
I should know this. I know I'm still trying to learn
after
everybody.
Nelson, we gotta wait. There's a moment of silence.
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So Tony, when we were at the TASA TCFB Leadership Conference,
Mhm.
I know that TCFB had you come in and do a presentation for the new executive directors.
Yes.
And I sat in there because I was like, oh my God, it's Tony speaking. I'm there. I'm not a new executive director, but I'm 5 years in. And so of course, was captivated by everything you were saying. One thing in particular that you said is you were talking about how whenever a new executive director is hired, oftentimes, I think it's just a knee jerk or a default that we are looking for the deficits.
Mhm.
So if we had an executive director that was not very detail oriented, then we're going to look for somebody who's very detail oriented.
Right.
Or if someone who wasn't out there in the community, we want somebody who's out there in the community. And you talked about the dangers of that
Mhm.
because it's discounting all their strengths that they had.
Sure.
And we all have strengths and weaknesses. Can you share with folks? I just was so enthralled
Well,
with what you were
yeah,
saying.
I find that, and I've helped some agencies as they look for new EDs, and I certainly found this when I came to Friends of the Family, is that many times the board looking for, they have really taken account of all the things that the previous ED did not have. And so they start to look, they kind of start there as their search, but they discount all of the strengths that she did bring to the table. And then the new person may not have those. So in my case, it was very much the previous ED. She was not necessarily real outgoing. She was not, she probably didn't use her voice as much. But she was very much participating in the billing process. And so when I came on board, then I could go out and do all the things and shake all the trees and all of that, but I did not have the experience with the billing process. And so it really put a big burden on the person who was currently the business administrator, because suddenly she was doing twice the work, because really the ED did a lot of that. And I think that for search, it's almost like we get set up. When you're a new ED, there's a certain amount of what I call the great setup, because you were hired for the deficits of your predecessor, but you are not they're not taking consideration all of the strengths that person has. And so when you come on, you get a lot of really quick wins. And we all need those as a new ED. We want those quick successes, or even in any leadership role in the organization. Doesn't have to necessarily be the ED, but we have to also take account of the things that the strengths that person had, and to look at all those. I'm a real big believer in, I want to know all of my strengths and my weaknesses, and I'm surrounded by people who help me to know those, believe me. But I want to know my strengths and my weaknesses, because as an executive director, I hire to my weaknesses. I don't need to have a whole leadership team of people just like me. If I did, we would be partying. We would always be coming up with new ideas. My marketing development director, she's like me. But we can't have all of us like us. We need to have the Dr. Roberts and the Catherine Boswell and the Donna Bloom, and we need to have this whole variety of people, because if not, we'd have a great time. We probably wouldn't have any money. We would do have all of new programs. There'd be a new program idea every week, but the staying power and the sustainability would not exist. So I'm really big on, don't be afraid to hire people that are different from you, and to know your weaknesses. As a leader, you have to know your weaknesses. And people don't like to say weaknesses. It's a bad word, the W word, but it is true. Your opportunities for growth, your strengths that are waiting, whatever you want to call them, know what they are, and then hire to those things, because it'll make your organization stronger.
Sorry, what were you saying, Ted?
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Mhm.
Speaking of Ted, so when we say leadership,
Mhm.
we joke and laugh about having different people, and we lovingly call Ted, or he calls himself the Dream Crusher. So we're all like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. And he's like, well, yeah, what about this?
Yes.
But we all, but the realist, I guess we'll say the pragmatic
Yes.
realist, but we all do need that is such a good point. Or we'll say things like, what's your weakness? Oh, my weakness is I work too much.
Oh, yeah.
I work too hard. That's my weakness. So Tony, are there any significant, since you've started in this position, utilizing your strengths and all that, are there any changes or policies or protocols or operational, flows that you changed, since?
Oh, yeah, we've changed so many times. There've been so many variations of us over the last 18 years. I mean, I think for all of you will speak, COVID changed our world completely. Because I am 100% old school in that you got to see a client face to face to provide services. Before COVID, we had an absolute no remote work policy. I didn't want you even checking your email from home. You could do it, but don't count on your timesheet, right? And so when COVID came along, then I mean, I was really hesitant to make the leap. And so Donna Bloom was the first person on our staff saying, "I'm going home and I'll take PTO." And I was like, "Bye, girl." And so she did. And then by March, when everything was getting shut down, then there was a reality that occurred that in order to keep people safe and to be responsible, and that the law said it now, that we were going to have to go remote. And so we did. But we had done a lot of infrastructure building prior to, and the years prior to COVID, that helped us to be in a position to be ready. That we could actually, we had an operations person, director of operations, that we called her our own personal Dr. Fauci. She was there. She helped us to pull things through. We were able to get policy pulled through in a very short amount of time and get it approved by our policy board. And we were just able to operationalize. And I say all the time in Denton County that during COVID, everyone adjusted their hours, even Walmart, except for hospitals, law enforcement, and Denton County Friends of the Family. We didn't miss not one day. We operated 24 hours a day, every single day, and we never skipped. And so we were able to remote access client staff. And then, but about 70% of our team came back before they were required. But we came back the first time because I also am known to have a petty side, right? And so the first time we came back, and then we realized that we had a staff person who'd been to every facility, all 6 of them, and had tested positive for COVID. And we're going to have to shut down and remote everyone again. I couldn't send the email because I was too petty. I was just like, I can't send the email to everybody to go back home. And Catherine Flowers, now, who is our associate ED, she sent an email saying our fearless leader is too petty to send this email, but you all need to go remote home. So we did, and we survived. And but yes, just this year we had a new policy package that included 6 weeks of parental leave upon birth or giving or adopting. We extended the accrual rate. We have, I don't know, I think 10 holidays plus 2 floating holidays. We usually get a week at between Christmas and Thanksgiving as a gift to salaried personnel. We pay 100% of employee health insurance at the lower end of the scale. So we've just tried to be very intentional about taking care of our workforce, about trying to take care of our workplace culture. We're just having August 1st, we'll have a new position called the Director of People and Culture. And we're really excited about that. And that really came as a result of listening to exit interviews, listening to current employees, listening to leadership team, and looking at how do we do better. Our workforce is different now. Any of us who've been in this work for a long time know that our workforce is different now than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And so they require different things of us. They require, we started a leadership institute that helps to look at those shining leaders, because they are informal leaders in their group. And we realized that just in having, we have our annual breakfast awards and having staff to nominate their colleagues for different awards. And there were 3 young ladies who were awarded, who were nominated across various awards. And one of them, somebody wrote about one of them, said, she's the next Tony Johnson Simpson. I said, well, who is this girl? Let me meet her, because I didn't know who she was. And then I met her and I understood when I met with all three of them. And so from that, we developed a Leadership Institute Academy in order to help to cultivate our own leaders. And some of the information that came from that was that they wanted to have a more flexible work environment, that they wanted to have these workplace kind of culture that we had kind of scratched the surface at, but had not fully evolved into. So now we will have a director of people and culture that will help to hold us accountable and to do some of those things.
I love that. I love that. We have a director of experience and engagement
Mhm.
for that reason too. We still have a long way to go, but we're trying because I know that to hire someone, it is so hard to
Yes.
find folks to fill positions. And so, I always find myself saying, well, you're not going to make a ton of money, but we have all these things that we offer. But at the same time, I think as leadership, we have to, I think, as you mentioned, listening and providing flexibility, allowing folks to live their life. They have kids, they don't have kids, they have pets, all of that takes time. So, and also, folks not being afraid to make a mistake. I know
Yes.
that's another one. Like I've been to areas where they're like, oh, I can't, they're just so afraid to make a mistake. And I've had to tell, my staff and others is like, I can't think of a mistake that's so big that can't be fixed. I mean, embezzlement is not a mistake. So if that ever happens, that's not what I'm talking about. But I don't, other than that, I don't think there's a mistake that's so big. But it sounds like that's what y'all are creating. And I love that. And back to the COVID thing. And when you said it was the hospitals,
Mhm.
law enforcement, and the Denton County Friends of the Family.
Yes.
And that is how it was across the state. And I
Yes.
recognized that immediately. And when we talked to the ledge after that, that would have been the 87th, 88th now. Yeah, I let them know, like, these are the unsung heroes, because not only did rape crisis centers, sexual assault DV programs, not only did they not stop doing the work, y'all had to flip your
Yes.
business model on
We
its head.
did. We had to pivot. So we couldn't go to the hospitals to do response for sexual assault victims anymore. So we had to buy iPads and then get the nurse to call the advocate that was on call so that we could have that face-to-face time with the survivor and then still follow up with her. And then we just, it took a great deal of effort. And a lot of it was getting out of our own, way, because in our funders who had always said services are delivered face-to-face. And that's what we live by, right? Is the dollar. And so we had to start before they approved it and just hoping that they were going to catch up with us.
So yeah, so that was something that, we did a lot of work to make sure that our legislators understood that you all were right there, I thought, gosh, you give these guys the budget, they'll balance the budget, the national budget, I think.
Right.
We'll do it. So switching gears, I know also what I talked about at the TASA and TCFV leadership conference, we talked about, leadership or leading during uncertain times or during challenging times. And I think in Texas, it's safe to say that we are living in some uncertain times, some challenging times. What do you feel is needed to lead in uncertain or challenging times?
I always go back to collaboration. I think that sometimes as a leader, particularly when you're new in a leadership role, and it's whether you're the ED or CEO or department lead or whatever, then we feel like we have to have all the answers all the time. And I think we will put too much pressure on ourselves, and we really sell our organization short when we do that. That it is recognizing the talent and the skill and the wisdom of those people around you, and it is including them, and it is hearing the things that you don't want to hear sometimes. It is really having a collaborative approach, but not always. Sometimes we get really caught up on our ego. And I think a lot of times this is a very female led movement, and we want to, as women, we take the reins, we lead. And so I encourage us to also invite other women to participate with that with us and to know that it's okay to have someone else's voice. There are many times when my leadership team, they will have a different opinion than I have, and I will concede to their path. Now, I always give it with a disclaimer that if you're wrong, I get to say, I told you so. And since I will always come back and say, oh, I told y'all so. But I also will celebrate in the victories. But more than anything, it is an air of respect. We have a great deal of respect and appreciation for each other. And I think that it allows for us to have respect outside of our walls. And that encourages people to engage with us. It encourages people to know that we will take good care of them in the process. They're not going to get blindsided by us. We're not going to go out and just blow somebody up. We're going to really look at how we have those partnerships and how we continue to be collaborative with each other.
That is beautiful. I think that's so important. And I know during I keep referring back to the TASA TCFE conference because
I should have pulled my PowerPoint up
I
there.
know we should have. That would have been way equally as as helpful. Another thing that we did at the conference. So Gloria and I, when we're planning, well, our staffs work together and they plan that conference. And Gloria always has these. She always says I have them, but really she's the one that has these really cool ideas about what we should do together on stage. And so the first one we had talked about was kind of like a TED Talks with a PowerPoint. And she explained it to me like 10 times. And I was like, I really don't know what she's talking about. So I created this PowerPoint. And so apparently you talk and the PowerPoint's going and you hope that it aligns with what you're saying or something like that. So I was like, that sounds interesting. So of course I did my PowerPoint. It didn't work, any of that. So Gloria's was flawless. It was just beautiful.
Naturally.
But what I ended up doing is in that I thought, well, let me see, because I was actually going through it. I think a lot of us were going through it as a movement. And so what I decided to do at that point was to do free thought. I was just going to write down what I was feeling, answer the question of how do you lead an uncertain, or what do I think about leadership in uncertain times? And I decided I'm going to free write, and then I'm just going to be vulnerable and share that with the group.
Okay.
And I decided to do that. So I was going to read that if that's okay. I know I had some folks ask if I would do that. So I'll read, and it's going to sound really, it's not a poem. It's not, I don't know what it is. But I want to share.
Free flowing thoughts.
It's free flow thought. And it kept coming back to authenticity.
Yes.
So I wanted to I'm going to read that just for y'all and for those who asked if I would do that again. And then I wanted to ask you about authenticity and your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So let me get mine. Okay. So I called it authentically underestimated. So here it is. Okay. So leading in a changing world requires authenticity, they say. Well, what if your authentic self is seen as a threat? What if your authentic self makes them as whoever that is to you uncomfortable? What if your authentic self is seen as foreign or exotic to them? What if your existence does not look like a leader to them? Some of us do not even make it in the door. Or when your perspective or your leadership is seen as the enemy to them, when all we want to do is serve all survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, regardless of who they love, their status, their gender, their background or abilities. Why is this a problem? How do you lead in a changing world when you are not regarded as a leader? This explains my weird relationship with power. I keep hearing how powerful and influential I am, but I also feel invisible and sometimes helpless. Being middle-aged though, we slide under the radar without much fanfare. I think it's a trap designed to relegate in silence. I say, screw that. Be your authentic self anyway. We are advocates. We are scrappy. Our authenticity and leadership, all of us, I don't care what color we are, what gender we are, what neck of the woods we're from, our authenticity is our magical power. This moment requires us to burst through the status quo, and the antidote is to be our authentic selves and the type of leadership that flows from there. Leading in a changing world requires a focus on growth and adaptability. They say, we know that, but what if growth and adaptability is seen as a threat? What if it is seen as woke? And it makes them uncomfortable. What if growth and adaptability is foreign to them? What if status quo is their strategic goal? What if status quo is their weighted blanket or a thunder jacket for the dog lovers? That is the duress we as leaders in this movement are under, if I'm going to be frank and authentic. It is scary and somewhat traumatizing to be a leader in this movement today. We worry about our funding and the effect on survivors. Will it be held hostage? I mean, really, it's 2023, and most of us are concerned that serving sexual assault survivors, regardless of who they are, may put us at risk or put a target on our back. As leaders, we forecast, we seek out indicators, we are constantly anticipating threats, the risks, what's working, what's not working. So we see the writing on the wall. This moment requires your authentic selves. It requires my authentic self, the power of tapping into your soul, your higher self, your instincts, regardless of what they see us as, leader or not. I think that's what gives us our edge. You see, they underestimate us. People underestimate what they don't see. That is our magical power. So leading in a changing world requires that magic each of us has. So stay connected to you, your authenticity, your core, not the mask they force you to wear, not the mask status quo requires you to wear. Block out the noise in their attempts at fear. Think back to the fearless you as a child full of wonder and curiosity, laughing away the mistakes, going home to the comfort of your grandmother, mother, safe adults, unconditional love, and recognize tomorrow as an opportunity for fun, play, and creativity. Then I just said that we have your back. And the other thing I said, as the Jamaican proverb says, those who won't hear must feel. So I say that our collective wrath is our voices, and they will hear us if they don't feel us first. So that was that. Sorry, that was long, but that was a free write, and I'm just gonna share it out there. So you can tell I was going through something at that point. But Tony, what do you think about authenticity in that sense? I was having this conversation with someone, and I was like, some of us, we can't be authentic. Like if we're authentic, it scares the hell out of them. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I do believe you have to be authentic. I think that it is, and I don't think that you have to, but I think part of being authentic is also being measured. Because when I speak or when I represent something, I'm not just doing it as just Tony Simpson. I'm Tony Johnson Simpson at Denton County Friends of the Family, and it is serving all of those citizens in our community. So I do believe that you have to be authentic. I think that the part that you have to be the most vulnerable and authentic with are those people that surround us inside of our organization. Because I know that if we can do that internally, if they can see me as vulnerable and they can know who I really am, then it helps them to be a force out in the community. I'm only one person. We are a staff of 80 and volunteer force of 400. So I need all of them to be able to deliver that. But we have a lot of things that I believe for us that we very much talk about internally, how we can share. It doesn't mean we don't get frustrated with one another, but it is important that they know my values, they know the values of the organization, and that people feel like they can trust me. Because if they feel like they can trust me to take care of them, even if they get out there in the community and it's in a situation that is uncomfortable, then they know that they can count on us to support them. Then that makes a big difference for people, for advocates that are out in the force. So we are very much authentic. Yeah.
You said trust, and when you said that, I thought, I wonder, like the relationship of authenticity and trust. It's almost like you can build trust maybe even faster if you're authentic.
Absolutely. Yes.
I don't know if that's true. That's just what popped in my mind when you said that.
No, I think trust is a huge part of it, that it is very difficult to go out and represent ideals if you are being treated different as an employee than what you are asked to present to the community and how you're going to support survivors. It is ineffective to believe that people can go out and be an advocate for survivors and marginalized populations and all the people we represent if they're being treated poorly behind the walls of their organization. So we have to have that level of transparency within our organization. And if not, then we have to talk about it.
I love that you said transparency
Mhm.
and what that means and what that feels like for staff. When you're transparent in decisions that you make, it's like,
Yes.
this might not be the right decision,
Mhm.
but here's where it came from.
Yes.
Here is this other stuff that, not everybody has access to, like the bigger, whatever
Yes.
it is, and transparency and what that means. So Tony, what is your advice for maybe an ED out there? Let me switch this. What's the advice for staff? Let's think line staff
Mhm.
that's not in leadership position, and they feel the stuff that you just said, that maybe they have a leadership that has this style that is not very transparent, that's not very trauma informed.
Mhm.
What's your advice to staff?
Don't
who
wait
are-
till the exit interview to tell it, you know. I hate the exit interview when all the bombs are dropped. Just like, you could have told us that. I think you owe it to your leadership to go in to have a conversation. Conversations don't have to be confrontational or demanding or demeaning. It's really just a professional conversation to have to someone, because people could have behaviors that have unintended consequences that they did not, or they think that, there are things that I think that all of my staff knows. And then I have a conversation with somebody, I'm like, well, where'd that come from? Now, y'all made that up. That is not true at all. It's someone just told me not long ago, oh, I hear we have a secondary shelter. The satellite shelter, we pay $1 a year rent. I was like, well, that's not true. I wish. No. And I can't, and I'm always big on, how do I trace this back? Who told you that? And then they think they're, caught up in an interrogation. And I don't mean it that way. I'm just trying to dispel the myth, because people say things and then it comes legend, and it's not. It's all just, and it's like, no, that we don't even pay $1 a month. No, we pay real rent. So it is, go to leadership, have those conversations, and encourage them to be able to listen. And it's all in delivery upon how people can hear it. Sometimes the message gets caught in how it's delivered. But if you deliver it to people in a non-threatening way and just, I want to do this for the greater good of our organization, then people will listen. So you just have to be willing to stop talking about it just amongst each other who have no authority to change it, but go and talk to leadership, because that's where the change is going to occur.
I love that. And I think for leaders, we need to make sure that we're providing an environment where they don't
Mhm.
feel that scared, where their fear
Yes.
is not there. Because I think sometimes I think at your organization, you all have a wonderful setup. I think there's some organizations, maybe not, where line staff may fear if they come forward, all of a sudden they're out the door.
Yes.
So I think if you're a leader in this room at any level, whether you're CEO or whether you're, the director of something, or you're the team lead, let's please make sure that we keep an open door, or whatever environment that is. We can get some information from from Tony's, what is it, Director of People and Culture.
Director of
I
People and
love
Culture.
that.
Yeah, I'm
I
really
love
excited
that.
about her joining us. She comes with a long history of working in this work, of over 43 years in this work. So I'm really excited about having her to join us. But I think years and years ago, when I was an advocate, I was in an organization, and we had a lot of internal turmoil in our culture. And Toby Myers, for those of us who've been in this work for a long time, they brought Toby Myers in to talk to us, and she said, you have to be very careful, because a lot of times nonprofits take on the dynamics of the population that you serve.
Whoa.
And she said, many of you in this room will go on to provide leadership in this work, in this movement, and you have to be very aware and conscientious that you do not create the dynamic of the population that we serve. And we serve a dynamic population where it is about power differential, and it's about that dynamics. And so that has always, for me, been very much a guiding force. When she said that, it resonated with my heart, to want to make sure that while there's always going to be, and we've looked at org charts, they've tried to get me, let's do a circular org chart. Let's do one shaped like a heart. We've looked at all of the things, and the reality is ultimately authority and power that is going to lie within a position, right? And that's okay. It is what you do with that power and authority that makes the difference. So I understand the privilege that I have of sitting in the chair with the power and authority, but I also understand the responsibility of that. And so I think with the privilege comes great responsibility. It's what you do with it. And so Toby Meyer's words always have stayed with me. And I don't want to create that power dynamic of in our organization. And so we work hard to try to keep that.
Wow, that's beautiful. With privilege comes responsibility.
Absolutely.
And recognizing that.
Recognizing it. I mean, it's when you're, new ED or CEO and you all of a sudden realize like, oh, you're it. I call it the job that's the woman on the island because everyone has a peer except for you. And you could very much get caught up in the ego thing, but you don't have to have the best parking space. I'm always like when I go to agencies and like even churches and the pastor has the best parking space. Well, why you got the biggest paycheck? You got to have the best parking space too. I mean, give up something. I just think that you have to look at all of the things and what it says to your workplace and to your greater community. If you always have to have the last word, if everything has to be your idea, if I don't care who people get the message of Denton County Friends of the Family from, it doesn't have to be me because everybody's not going to like me. They're going to like other people on my staff better, and that is perfectly okay. It doesn't need to be me. I just want them to get the message of the organization. I want for them to interface with survivors in a respectful manner. In a trauma-informed manner. I don't need for it to be me. So there are many people that that may be like, they may know Donna Bloom and not know me. And then they'll meet me and say, you're Donna's boss. I said, well, figuratively speaking, not really, but sure. But it is, to me, that's important that it's about the organization.
I love that. And I think that, again, when you spoke at the ED conference to the new EDs, I thought, God, there is something special about Tony. And again, your reputation preceded you before that. I had heard.
Look at the eye
wonderful-
rolls back there. So you look at there, look at them,
Donna's eyes roll.
Donna, I don't even see Donna anymore. Catherine, she's in my eye. I see her eyes are like burning right here beside my head. Yeah. But Lori's the nice one, right? Yeah.
But Tony, I am so honored that you took the time. I know you're super busy, that you and your staff took the time to, work with us and to welcome us to Denton and to welcome everyone here from whatever neck of the woods that you're from. And just honored to be on this stage with you. It is like, I feel like I'm a fangirl, like I'm fangirling out over
We're
here.
mutual fans. We all have to be in Gloria Terry back there. I'm always a Gloria Terry fan.
Yes, absolutely. So, and yeah, when Gloria told me she was coming, I was like, what?
I know. I texted her last week. I said, are you going to be there? And then she wants to have a dance off with me tomorrow at
the stage.
at the reception. She's like, we're going to have a dance off. I was like, oh, bring it, girl. Let's do it.
I could put Beyonce on. I should have told them to get Beyonce when we're walking off.
Exactly.
But no, I just wanted to thank you, Tony. It is such an honor, not only for me, but I think for everyone here, just to hear the wisdom, the authenticity about what's made you what makes you so special, what's made the Denton County Friends of the Family just a powerhouse in Texas. I mean, because y'all are amazing here locally, but you're also like a model for the state. So
I
that has
appreciate
to do
that.
with you and your staff and what that magic y'all have going on over
Absolutely.
there. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have any last parting words before we?
I will just say that as you're developing your leadership style, to be okay in asking people, be okay in giving yourself permission to make mistakes, especially in this changing time, and to celebrate your successes. And when you have an oops, to acknowledge it and learn from it and move on. But always remember to reach out, I think, to all of us. We all want to be a partnership. You know, we're unfortunate in this work that we don't have a united kind of theme always, an identity like the CAC, our rich auntie, right? But we do have the thing that unites us is the passion about the work and the commitment and the dedication. And so to know that whether you're in my community or a community in South Texas or West Texas, wherever it is, we're all doing the same thing. And so if there's a way that we can help and support each other, then let's please reach out and let's do that. Absolutely. And come to the party tomorrow. We want to make it good for you. Our marketing development team has worked really closely with TASA's team to, we have bites from food from all over the county, some restaurants that are very unique to Denton. We have Beth Marie's, which is the best ice cream you're gonna ever get. And so, and a lot of other different things, and then a bar, so, in music. So, I mean, come on, you gotta come on out and enjoy tomorrow's festivities and let's have fun.
Yes, thank you so much, Tony, and let's all give her a warm TASA Denton, Texas welcome, and a thank you, thank you. Oh, Lord, I was like, am I gonna be able to get off that chair? I did, thank God. They're really low. So thank y'all so much. I think that the next thing is that you have a 30-minute break. So we have exhibitors out there, and then we have the workshops that will be starting at 10:30. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments, I'm sure Tony will be happy to, as she's walking up the stage, to answer those, or I'm here as well. So thank y'all. Welcome. If you need any help, TASA staff is around. Yeah, so y'all have a good one and we'll see y'all soon.
Hello. Yes, thank you. I received the question from an attendee. They are not taking any questions, but I will pass that question along because I think that question is very important, and we'll communicate how we'll answer that question and when they will answer that. I want to give a big thank you to our interpreters, Susana and Gabriela. Thank you so much for what you do, and I hope you all have a great conference. Thank you.